The security guard had his hand on my elbow before I could even get the words out of my mouth. Right there in the hallway of one of the most expensive hotels on the South Carolina coast, in front of my own son, in a blazer with someone else's child's blood drying on the lapel. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I walked out through that lobby like a man who had somewhere better to be because, as it turned out, I did. What I didn't know yet was that the mother of the little girl whose blood was on my jacket was already on her way. And what she did when she got there, I'll be talking about that for the rest of my life. I need to take a breath and just tell you how we got there. Because if I start at the end, you're going to miss the part that matters most. My name is Everett. I'm 63 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom ranch house in North Charleston, and I spent 35 years running a small engine repair shop off Dorchester Road that my father started and I finished. I know every sound a sick engine makes the way some men know the Bible. My wife Lorraine passed 4 years ago this coming March, and she took most of the color out of the world with her when she went. Our son Marcus is the light that's still on. He married a woman named Priya 8 years ago. And Priya is a genuinely good person who has spent most of those 8 years quietly apologizing for a family she didn't choose. Priya's parents were the Chandrasekhar Whitfields, Devika and Owen Whitfield. Owen had built a commercial real estate empire across 3 states and had a way of looking at you while you were talking, like he was calculating what you were worth per square foot. Devika ran a foundation for the performing arts and wore her money the way other women wear perfume, not loud, but you always knew it was there. From the first Thanksgiving dinner 8 years ago, when Devika had touched the sleeve of my sport coat the way you touch something at a garage sale that you're not going to buy, I understood my place in their world. I was the father of their son-in-law. That was the ceiling. That was also the floor. Marcus called me on a Tuesday morning at just past 6. He only calls me that early when something's wrong or when he wants to ask me something he hasn't figured out how to ask yet. I picked up on the second ring. I was standing in my kitchen in my undershirt, watching the backyard bird feeder the way I do every morning because Lorraine hung it there and I'll be damned if I'm going to let the squirrels have it uncontested. "Pop," he said. I waited. So Owen and Devika's anniversary is Saturday. The big one, 30 years. They're doing it at Palmetto Bluff. Priya really wants you there. Priya wants you there. Not Marcus. Not the Whitfields. Priya, my daughter-in-law, who had been quietly advocating for my dignity for 8 years with the patience of a woman who loves 2 families that are never going to fully understand each other. "I'll be there, Marcus." He exhaled like I just told him a diagnosis was benign. "Thanks, Dad." Black tie. "But Priya said sport coat is completely fine for you." "Sport coat is completely fine for you." I stood there holding the phone for a moment after we hung up, looking at the bird feeder, and I thought about Lorraine. She would have laughed. Not meanly. She just had this laugh she used when the world showed you exactly what it was, like she appreciated the honesty of it. Then she would have told me to wear the navy blazer and hold my head up, so that was what I was going to do. I've been in rooms like that before, you understand. I know what it feels like to be the wrong kind of presence. To be the man who worked with his hands in a room full of men who work with spreadsheets. To be the one whose car they valet with a look. I had decided years ago that I was not going to apologize for the 35 years I'd spent making something real with my own hands, and I was not going to bend myself into a shape that fits someone else's picture frame. But I also wasn't going to make Marcus's life harder. So I laid out the blazer the night before and polished my shoes on the back porch with a Braves game on the radio, and I left with nearly 2 hours to spare. Palmetto Bluff is out on the May River, about 45 minutes southwest of Beaufort if you take 17 and then cut down through the flats. It's the kind of resort where the architecture is designed to remind you that people like you don't normally get to be there. I'd driven past the entrance once, years ago, and Lorraine had looked at the gate and said, "Baby, that's where people go who need the whole world to know they made it." She'd said it soft, not bitter, just clear-eyed. I left at 5:15 in the afternoon. The old Silverado had 212,000 miles on it, but I maintained my engines the way other men maintain grudges, carefully, consistently, and with a lot of patience. The Low Country was doing what it does in late April, that brief window before the heat gets serious, where the marsh grass is going electric green and the air smells like salt water and something sweet underneath it. I was about 20 miles north of Beaufort, on a long, straight stretch where the road cuts through pine and the Spanish moss hangs over the asphalt when I saw the skid marks. A dark green minivan had gone off the right shoulder at an angle, front end nose down into the drainage ditch. There was glass on the road, and a woman was standing in the road with both arms up, waving at every car coming south. I watched 4 cars swerve around her and keep going. 4 cars. I pulled the Silverado onto the shoulder, hit my flashers, and got out. She was maybe 35, hair loose and wild, one shoe off. She'd been crying so hard she was past the point where tears make sound. "My daughter," she said, "please. My daughter's in the back." I went to the van. The sliding door was already open. There was a little girl, maybe 8 years old, buckled into a booster seat, and she was seizing. I had seen it before because Lorraine's youngest brother, Terrence, had epilepsy for most of his adult life. I knew the sound of it, the rhythm of it, the specific quality of stillness that follows. The little girl's eyes had rolled back and her body was going in waves, rigid then slack, and there was foam at the corner of her mouth. "Did she hit her head in the crash?" I asked. I don't know. A dog ran out and I swerved and we went in, and then the woman was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Please help her. Please." I had already called 911 before I got out of the truck. On instinct, the way you do when the emergency happens before the thought does. The dispatcher said the nearest unit was 13 minutes out of Ridgeland. 13 minutes is geological time. When a child is convulsing. "What's her name?" I asked. "Nadia." "Her name is Nadia." "Nadia, I'm right here. You're going to be okay, sweetheart." I unbuckled her carefully, watching the cycle, waiting. When her body went slack between waves, I lifted her out and laid her on her left side in the grass off the shoulder, the way Terrence had taught me 30 years ago at a backyard cookout, where he'd shown me what to do if it ever happened when Lorraine wasn't around. Recovery position. Don't restrain them. Don't put anything in their mouth. Protect the head. Let it finish. I took off my blazer and rolled it under her head. The grass was wet. I felt my slacks soak through at the knees. I didn't notice the blood until later. There was a small cut on Nadia's hairline, probably from the car door frame when they went into the ditch. It wasn't serious, but it bled the way head wounds do, more than the damage warrants. The seizure ran another 90 seconds, and then it stopped. Her breathing changed deep and slow and ragged, the kind that means the worst is over. Her color came back. Her eyes found mine, big and confused and frightened. "Where's my mama?" "She's right here, baby. I'm Everett. You're safe. Your mama's right here." The mother was on her knees in the wet grass, hands pressed together in front of her mouth, shaking. I told her to look at me. I told her to breathe. I asked if Nadia had a history of seizures, and she nodded fast and said yes. Diagnosed 10 months ago. They thought it was controlled. They just changed her medication 2 weeks before. I want to be honest with you. I was not thinking about the party. I was not thinking about the blazer or the Whitfields or what time dinner started. There was a child in the grass and a mother on her knees, and nothing else in the world existed at that moment. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. 2 sharp young EMTs who moved the way good emergency workers move without urgency in their faces, because urgency belongs to the situation, not the person managing it. The older one took the mother aside and talked to her slow and steady. The younger one got Nadia on the stretcher. The head cut was small. Her vitals were stable. She was going to be all right. The older paramedic looked at me over the stretcher. "Sir, are you family?" "No, sir." I just stopped. He nodded the way a man nods when he wants to say something he doesn't have time for. "Thank you." The mother grabbed my hand before they closed the ambulance door. Her hand was small and freezing cold. "Your name. Please tell me your name." "Everett Dokoroi." "I'm Simone. Simone Okafor. I have to go with her. I don't know how to." "You go," I told her. "Don't think about anything out here. I'll wait with the vehicle until the tow truck comes." She looked at me for 1 second. Not the way you look at a stranger. The way you look at someone who just became part of your life. Then the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away. I stood there on the shoulder of Highway 17 with grass stains on my knees and blood drying on the blazer I'd put back on because the evening air had gone cool. Simone Okafor had left her purse in the van without realizing. I had the tow number from the 911 dispatcher. I called it and I waited. The tow driver took 40 minutes. He was a big, quiet man from Ridgeland named Burl who looked at the scene and said, You stay with her until they came? I said I did. He whistled low. Good man. By the time I was back in the Silverado, my hands had started shaking. That's always how it goes with me. I hold it together when I have to, and then afterward, the body sends the invoice. It was 8:53 when I turned into the drive at Palmetto Bluff. I tried Priya twice from the road. Both calls went to voicemail. The sellout on those flats is thin and unreliable, and I couldn't be sure my messages had gotten through. I'd left them anyway. There was an accident, a child. I was on my way. I was sorry for the time. The valet stand had two young men in white jackets. The one who stepped toward the Silverado looked at the truck the way people look at a misspelled word. Then he looked at me at the blazer, the stained knees, the set of my face, and his expression did something careful and decided. Sir, are you a guest this evening? I'm here for the Chandrasekhar Whitfield anniversary party. My son is their son-in-law. A long pause. Of course. The terrace ballroom. Follow the flags to the right. He did not take my keys. I parked the Silverado in the far end of the guest lot, which I suspect was also a first for the Palmetto Bluff parking staff. I walked through the lobby, all dark wood and candlelight, and the kind of furniture that makes you feel like you should be quieter. There was a string ensemble playing in an alcove and couples in tuxedos and floor-length gowns, standing in clusters holding champagne flutes, with the specific relaxed posture of people who have never once in their lives worried about the mortgage. I felt every eye in that lobby clock my presence the moment I stepped off the mat. Not hostile, exactly. Just registering. The way people register something that doesn't fit the pattern. I straightened my tie. The tie was clean. I walked through. The terrace ballroom had its doors open wide. I could hear the sound of 300 people making the kind of noise that money makes when it's comfortable. I stood at the threshold for just a moment and tried to brush the grass off my knees. It didn't come off. I walked in. The room went quiet in sections. Not all at once, it moved like a wave. The people near the door noticing first, then the people behind them turning to see what those people were looking at, and then the whole room pulling its attention toward me, the way iron filings pull toward a magnet. I kept walking. I was looking for Marcus and Priya. Owen Whitfield saw me before I found them. He was at the head table on a low platform with Devika beside him, and when he saw me, he stood up slowly, the way a man stands when he's decided to handle something and wants the room to know he's handling it. He was in a black tuxedo, and he had the easy, upright posture of a man who has never had to convince a room that he belonged in it. Priya came running from a side table. Everett, oh my God, are you hurt? What happened? I'm not hurt, Priya. There was an accident on 17, a little girl. Devika's voice cut across the room. Not loud, precise. Priya turned. Priya, this is our anniversary. Mom, he stopped to help someone. Owen was beside me now. He took my elbow, the way you take an elderly person's elbow at a curb. Everett, let's step into the hall for a moment. I want you to understand what that feels like. The hand on the elbow. The firm, quiet guidance toward a door. 35 years of building something with your own hands. Of being the man your neighborhood called when their equipment broke and their heat went out and their engines wouldn't start. And a man who has never touched a carburetor in his life walks you out of a room by the elbow like you're a situation to be managed. We went into the hallway. Marcus followed. Priya followed Marcus. Owen released my arm. His face was composed. Reasonable. He was a man who had delivered hard news in boardrooms and believed he was being kind now. Everett, I want to be fair to you here. I understand something happened on the road, but you have to understand our position. There are 300 guests in that room. There are business partners, foundation donors, civic leaders. You are standing here with blood on your jacket and grass on your trousers, and honestly, I say this with respect, you look like something has gone seriously wrong. The perception alone, there was a child seizing an wrecked vehicle, Owen. I understand, and your instinct to stop speaks well of you, but the emergency is over now. The paramedics handled it. And right now what we need is for this evening to continue without the visual disruption. The visual disruption, I let that sit there between us for a second. Marcus finally spoke. Dad, maybe. Marcus, I looked at him. It's all right, son. It was not all right. And every person standing in that hallway knew it was not all right. But I was not going to make my son carry the weight of being caught between them. Owen continued. What I'd suggest, and I'm happy to cover any expense, is that you head back tonight and we do a proper family dinner in the next few weeks. Something relaxed. More your pace. More your pace. A man in a dark blazer appeared at the end of the hallway. Resort security, the kind they keep for exactly this purpose, so guests never have to see the ugly part of how social order gets maintained. He walked to us with the careful, respectful authority of a man who has done this before. Sir, I've had a concern raised by the hosting family. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. He didn't ask. Not really. He walked behind me through the lobby at exactly 6 feet, all the way to the front entrance, all the way through the tall doors and out into the night air. I didn't turn around. I didn't look at Marcus. I sat down on a stone bench by the fountain in the front courtyard. The jasmine was out and the night air was warm, and the fountain made the same sound all fountains make, indifferent and steady. My hands were shaking again. I sat there and looked at the sky and thought about Lorraine. She would not have let me mope. She would have said something short and true, and then she would have asked me whether I wanted coffee or sweet tea, and that would have been the end of it. I sat there and missed her, the way you miss a person who was better at this than you. That's when the black SUV came up the long drive. It pulled in soft and steady and stopped at the entrance. The driver got out and opened the back door, and Simone Okafor stepped out. She was in a dark burgundy dress. Her hair was pulled back. She had flat shoes on. Her face had that specific quality of someone who has made a decision and is now executing it. She was scanning the entrance, looking for something. Simone. She turned. She came across the courtyard and took both my hands. Nadia is stable. They're keeping her at the trauma center in Beaufort overnight for observation, but the neurologist said she's going to be fine. The neurologist said Everett. She said that putting her on her side is the reason there were no complications. That's you. You did that. Thank God. My husband is with her. I came the moment I could. I had to come. She was still holding both my hands and looking at my face. Everett, why are you out here? Why are you inside? I didn't answer right away. She looked at the blood on my blazer. She looked at the resort doors. She looked back at me, and something moved across her face, slow and certain, the way weather moves in. Come with me. Simone, I don't want to. Everett, come with me. There are moments in a man's life when the right thing to do is simply stop arguing and follow the person who can see more clearly than he can. This was one of those moments. I stood up. She took my arm. We walked back through those front doors together. The same lobby, the same couples in the same tuxedos, the same string ensemble in the alcove, and every single person in that room watched us walk through, this woman in burgundy with her hand on the arm of the man they just watched security escort out. The same security man stepped into our path at the hallway. He looked at Simone. She looked at him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Something in her bearing, the posture, the stillness, the complete absence of apology, stopped him where he stood. We walked back into the terrace ballroom. The room went quiet the same way it had gone quiet before, in waves. But this time, the silence had a different quality. It wasn't confusion, it was attention. 300 people paying attention. Devika was midway through what had apparently been a toast. The champagne flute was in her hand. When she saw us cross the threshold, her face went from pink to white to a color that has no name. She stepped forward. Excuse me. She stopped. Her eyes moved from me to Simone. Something happened in her face. Excuse me, Devika Chandrasekhar Whitfield, Simone said. Her voice carried. She was not speaking loudly. She was speaking from somewhere deep and grounded. The way people speak when they have stopped caring about the effect of their words and started caring only about the truth of them. We have corresponded. Your foundation and mine. My name is Simone Okafor. My husband Kwame and I run the Okafor Family Foundation. We've been funding pediatric neurology infrastructure in the Southeast for 11 years. Owen was standing now. The mayor of Charleston was at a table to the left, and I could see her turn fully in her chair. Senator Dillard, who I recognized from television, had put down his fork. We were on our way to Hilton Head tonight for a long weekend, Simone continued. My daughter Nadia had a seizure in the back seat of our vehicle after we swerved off the highway. We were in a ditch on Route 17. I was standing in the road waving my arms and 29 cars drove around me. I counted. 29. Nobody breathed. And then this man stopped. She put her hand on my arm. He held my daughter through her seizure. He knew the recovery position he'd learned it 30 years ago caring for someone he loved. He stayed with her until the ambulance came. He stayed with our wrecked vehicle until the tow truck came. He was supposed to be at this party. He was 2 hours late because he was saving my daughter's life. She paused. And when he arrived, your family had him removed by security. Devika opened her mouth, closed it. I want to say something about why I'm here in person, and then I'm going to stop taking up your anniversary. Simone's voice had gone very quiet now, which made it worse. 3 months ago, your foundation reached out to mine about co-funding a pediatric cardiac neurology wing at MUSC, the Chandrasekhar Whitfield wing. We had agreed in principle to contribute $14 million as the lead naming gift. I had the paperwork in my bag tonight. I was going to leave it at your foundation office on Monday morning. Owen's hands went to the edge of the table. I will not be doing that. Devika made a small sound. I want to be precise about why. It is not because of anything that happened to me tonight. I am fine. My daughter is going to be fine. It is because of what I learned tonight about the judgment and the character of the people whose name was going to be placed above the door of a ward where sick children are brought. A man came to your home having done something extraordinary. He arrived with the evidence of that act on his body, and your family's response was to have him removed from the room because his appearance was inconvenient. She looked around at the guests, at the room, at 300 witnesses. My foundation has one standard for the institutions we fund: character, not success, not prestige. Character specifically in the moments when nobody important is watching. Tonight I learned everything I needed to know. She turned back to Owen and Devika. The wing will still be built. I will have a new lead donor in place by the end of the month. The children who need that ward will still be served. But they will be served in a building that carries the name of someone whose character holds up in the dark. She looked at Devika one more time, not with anger, just with the particular sadness of a woman who expected better from the world and keeps being unsurprised. Happy anniversary. I want to pause here and tell you I have gone over that moment in my head more times than I can count, and I still do not know exactly what to do with how it felt to stand in the middle of that room and hear it. I'm a man who spent 35 years under cars and inside engines, a man who measured his success by whether his customers' machines ran when they should run. I am not a man who expects the room to go quiet on his behalf. I'm not sure I'm a man who was ready for that. But I will tell you this. When Simone finished, and the room was still, and all those people were looking at me standing there in the blood-stained blazer, I did not feel small. That was the first time in 8 years of attending the Whitfield's occasions that I had ever stood in a room and not felt small. Marcus was 3 feet to my left, and he was crying. Not dramatically, just standing there with his hand over his mouth and tears going down, and his shoulders doing the quiet, terrible work of a man who has held something in for too long. Priya had her arm around his waist. She was looking at her mother with a steadiness that I recognize as the accumulation of 8 years of patience, finally finishing its term. Marcus, I said. He couldn't speak. Son, it's all right. He shook his head. He took his hand away from his mouth and said, in a voice I hadn't heard from him since he was 11 years old, Pop, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't come back out for you. I should have walked back in when they took you out. I've been letting them treat you like this for 8 years, and I told myself it was keeping the peace, and it wasn't keeping anything. I was just being a coward. I'm so sorry, Pop. I'm so sorry. I put my hand on his shoulder. I told him a son doesn't owe his father an apology for being human. I told him the only thing I'd ever needed was for him to be happy, and that I could see every day that he was happy with Priya, and that was the thing that mattered. I told him I forgave him for everything he was apologizing for, and a couple of things he hadn't gotten to yet. He cried harder. Priya lifted her face from his shoulder and looked at her mother. Devika was still standing at the head table, the champagne flute still in her hand, the beautiful dress and the jewelry, and the whole carefully constructed evening still assembled around her. Mom, Priya said. Devika didn't answer. Mom, look at me. Devika looked at her daughter. We're leaving, Priya said. Marcus and I are leaving right now, and we're going wherever Everett is going. And I want you to think about tonight. I want you to really think about it. Because this man would have taken off his coat and put it under a stranger's child's head in the rain, and he did. And that's her blood on it, and you had him walked out of your party. Your party. Her voice broke just once. I don't know yet how I'm going to feel about that when I'm done thinking about it, but I think it's going to take a while. She took my arm. Marcus took the other. Simone walked ahead of us. The four of us walked out of that ballroom together, and 300 people watched us go. And the silence in that room was the kind of silence that means something. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of a room full of people deciding what kind of people they are. We went to a dinner about 12 miles out called Rosie's on the Neck. It had vinyl booths and a jukebox that still played actual 45s, and a waitress named Cecilia who had been working there since Marcus was in diapers and who gave us the big corner booth without being asked. Simone ate a BLT. I had the catfish. Marcus ordered the fried chicken and barely touched it. Priya had grits and sweet tea and at some point just put her face on Marcus's shoulder and stayed there. Simone told us about Nadia. 8 years old, obsessed with marine biology, already filling a notebook with species lists and habitat diagrams. The seizures had started just under a year ago and had been responding to medication until a shift in her brain chemistry 2 months earlier threw everything out of balance again. The crash hadn't caused the seizure had caused the crash. Simone had been driving and Nadia had gone down mid-seizure, and Simone had overcorrected from the sound and gone into the ditch. Her husband Kwame was with Nadia. He had called 3 times during the dinner to update her. Nadia was stable, awake, asking when her mom was coming back. I told them about Lorraine, about the repair shop, about Terrence, Lorraine's youngest brother, who had his first seizure at our engagement party of all places, and who had taught me everything I knew about how to help a person through one with calm hands and a quiet voice. Lorraine used to say the Dacarays could handle anything as long as they knew what they were handling. I'd spent 35 years learning how to be calm in front of broken things. I didn't know until that Tuesday night what all of that preparation had actually been for. Around 11, Marcus looked up at me across the catfish. "Pop," he said, "I have been a coward in that house for 8 years. And I kept telling myself that the trade-off was worth it, that the peace was worth it, and it wasn't. It was just easier. And it wasn't even easier for you, so that means it was only easier for me. And I'm ashamed of that. I want you to know I'm genuinely ashamed." I told him shame isn't something to hold on to. I told him the only question was what he was going to do from here on. He nodded for a long time. Cecilia brought us peach cobbler on the house. She didn't explain it. Some things explain themselves. Simone drove me home in the SUV. We left the Silverado at Rosie's and Marcus picked it up 2 days later. On the way back to North Charleston, I told her about the night Lorraine's father laid Terrence on the reception hall floor mid-seizure at our engagement party and finished his toast from there. Simone laughed for a long time at that. It was a good sound in a dark car on a quiet road. She pulled into my driveway just after midnight. She walked me to the door. "Everett," she said, "you saved my daughter's life. I want you to know that whatever you need, for as long as you're here, you call me. Not as a formality, as a fact." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said thank you and good night. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights disappear down the street. The porch light caught the bird feeder. The cardinals were all asleep, but I could see the shape of it against the dark. And I thought about Lorraine, and I thought about how she would have loved Simone Okafor, and how she would have loved Nadia, and how she would have put her hand on the side of my face and said, "Baby, that's exactly where you were supposed to be tonight." Marcus was at my door the next morning at 7:30 with coffee from the place I like and a box of those cheese biscuits from the bakery on Morrison. We sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours. He told me he and Priya were thinking about buying a house in North Charleston, closer to me. He told me Priya had not spoken to her mother since they walked out. He told me things he'd been carrying for 8 years that were lighter now that they were on the table between us. Nadia Okafor was discharged from the hospital that Monday. She sent me a card she made herself, construction paper, crayon, the whole thing. A drawing of a man with gray hair kneeling next to a little girl in a green field. At the top, in the large, careful letters of a child who is still learning to be precise, it said, "Thank you, Mr. Everett, you stayed." I framed it. It's on the kitchen wall, right next to the window where the cardinals come in the morning. Devika called me about 6 weeks later. She said she had thought a great deal about that evening and wanted to apologize. I told her I appreciated the call, that I held no grudge because grudges are heavy things, and at 63, I don't have any carrying capacity to spare. She said she understood. That was the last time we spoke. The Okafor Foundation did find a new lead donor for the pediatric neurology wing. It went forward under a different name, which is a fact I find quietly satisfying in the way that good outcomes are satisfying. MUSC has a new ward now. I've driven past it once. Didn't go in. Didn't need to. Now let me say something directly to you. Because this story has been sitting in me for almost 2 years, and there is a reason I'm telling it. If you have ever been the person in the room that people look through, the parent who gets the polite smile, the relative who sits at the card table, the one whose life choices don't translate into the language the other people are speaking, I want you to hear this. You are not being evaluated by the people who think they're evaluating you. The real evaluation is happening somewhere else entirely. It is happening in the small, private moments, in the ordinary Tuesday evenings when nobody is watching and you do the decent thing anyway. That is the only grade that counts. I spent 8 years contorting myself trying to figure out how to fit into a room where the only door was labeled worthy. I wore the right blazer. I brought the appropriate gifts. I modulated my voice and left my truck parked at a respectful distance. And the night I finally belonged somewhere, really belonged, I was kneeling in wet grass on a highway shoulder with someone else's child's blood on my jacket. The mistake most people make is thinking that belonging is something you achieve through performance. The truth I've come to is that belonging is something you find when you stop performing and start responding. The character you build in private, in all those small invisible moments of your life, is the only character you actually have. Everything else is a costume. What this story taught me is that the hand you've been quietly building your whole life is the one you get to play when it actually matters. My 35 years under engines taught me to stay calm in front of broken things. Lorraine's brother taught me exactly one piece of medical knowledge at exactly the right moment. The combination of those two things is the reason Nadia Okafor went home to her mother. Here's the question I want to leave with you. What are you building right now in the small moments when nobody is watching? What knowledge, what habit, what practice calm are you accumulating without knowing yet what it's for? Think about that tonight. I mean, really sit with it. I want to know what you think about this story. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think I made the right call stopping on that highway. Drop a 2 if you think Priya did the right thing walking out. Drop a 3 if you've ever been treated the way I was treated that night. And if you drop a 3, I want you to know I see you. And tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Because I think about the fact that someone on the other side of the planet might hear this story in the middle of their night and feel a little less alone. And that matters to me. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe. There's another one waiting for you right there on the left. Take care of each other out there. You never know which stranger on the side of the road is going to change your life, or whose life you're going to change just by stopping. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Charleston, South Carolina, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or to actual events is purely coincidental.